His name wasn't Bud Spencer. It was Carlo Pedersoli. And before he ever stepped in front of a camera, he had already lived more lives than most people could imagine. Lives filled with triumph, loss, reinvention, and a relentless pursuit of purpose. Let me ask you something. How many people do you know who were Olympic athletes, engineers, pilots, inventors, and only then became movie legends? Carlo wasn't just one thing. He was many. An Olympic swimmer. A law graduate. A man fluent in 6 languages. A songwriter. A road builder in the jungles of South America. A licensed commercial pilot with thousands of flight hours. An inventor with over a dozen patents. And almost by accident, one of the most beloved film stars in European history. But here's the real question. Was acting ever his true calling, or just the final chapter of an already extraordinary life? A childhood shattered by war. Carlo Pedersoli was born in Naples, Italy, in 1929, into comfort, stability, and privilege. His family lived well. There was structure, opportunity, and a future that seemed already mapped out. But history doesn't ask for permission. When World War II tore through Italy, Naples became one of the most heavily bombed cities in the country. Sirens, smoke, collapsing buildings, this became the backdrop of his childhood. One devastating airstrike destroyed his family's factory overnight. Everything was gone. Wealth, security, stability. His family fled to Rome, carrying what little they could salvage. Day by day, they sold their belongings just to survive. Meals became uncertain. Comfort became a memory. Now think about this. What does that kind of childhood do to a person? Does it break them, or forge something stronger? In Carlo's case, it built something unshakable. Amid chaos, he developed discipline. Amid fear, he built courage. And through hardship, he discovered something else. His body was capable of extraordinary things. By his teenage years, Carlo wasn't just athletic. He was unstoppable. The athlete who made history. Swimming became his first true identity. Not casually. Not as a hobby. As a mission. Every stroke in the water was precise. Every breath controlled. Every second mattered. At just 20 years old, Carlo achieved something no Italian had done before. He swam 100 meters in under 1 minute. That wasn't just a personal victory. It was a national milestone. He went on to compete in 2 Olympic Games, pushing himself against the best athletes in the world. He reached the semi-finals both times, an achievement that demanded not just physical strength, but mental endurance. But he didn't stop there. He transitioned into water polo, where his size, strength, and tactical mind made him a formidable force. He won championships, earned recognition, and built a reputation as one of Italy's most versatile athletes. For many people, that would be the peak of a lifetime. But for Carlo, it was only the first chapter. So here's a question. When someone reaches the top so early, what drives them to walk away and start again? The man who walked away from fame. Most athletes who reach that level chase recognition, endorsements, or comfort. Carlo chose something else entirely. He walked away. He enrolled in law school. He explored science. He chased knowledge with the same intensity he once reserved for swimming lanes. Then he did something even more unexpected. He left Europe altogether. In search of something deeper, Carlo moved to South America. Not for luxury. Not for fame. But to test himself. In the Venezuelan jungle, he worked as a construction foreman, helping build roads through unforgiving terrain. Thick humidity. Dangerous wildlife. Isolation. Uncertainty. This wasn't a glamorous reinvention. It was a deliberate challenge. Why would someone who had already achieved greatness choose such a path? His answer was simple and powerful. He wanted to know whether he was truly brave or just comfortable. Now ask yourself, how many people today would willingly strip away their success just to discover who they really are? A missed opportunity that echoed through history. Life, however, had more surprises waiting. Carlo eventually found himself in the music industry. He wrote songs, worked in production, and collaborated with record labels. It was another chapter, another identity. And then came a moment that would quietly echo through history. A young, unknown singer walked into an audition. He performed. Carlo listened carefully and rejected him. That singer was Domenico Modugno, the voice behind Volare, one of the most iconic songs ever created. Think about that for a second. How many life-changing moments pass through our hands, unnoticed? How often do we dismiss something because we cannot yet see what it will become? Even Carlo moved forward, unaware that he had just turned away a future legend. The accidental birth of Bud Spencer. By the time he reached his late 30s, Carlo had already lived several lives. Acting wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't even a dream. Then, almost by accident, an opportunity appeared, a role in a film. Nothing major. Just an experience. He accepted. But there was one condition. His real name had to go. It didn't sound international enough. So he created a new identity. Bud, inspired by his favorite beer, Budweiser. Spencer, inspired by his admiration for actor Spencer Tracy. And just like that, Bud Spencer was born. But fate wasn't finished. Just before filming began, another actor suffered an injury. A replacement was needed, quickly. That replacement was a young actor named Terence Hill. Two strangers. One unexpected pairing. And a chemistry no one could have predicted. Their on-screen dynamic, humor, timing, and physical presence sparked something electric. Audiences loved them. Their films blended comedy, action, and charm in a way that felt fresh and irresistible. Soon, what began as coincidence turned into legacy. They became one of the most iconic duos in European cinema. But here's something worth thinking about. Was this destiny finally catching up with Carlo? Or was it simply another example of a man saying yes to life again and again? More than an actor, the man behind the fame. Even as Bud Spencer became a household name, Carlo Pedersoli never allowed fame to define him completely. He continued flying aircraft, logging thousands of hours as a licensed commercial pilot. He kept inventing, securing patents for innovative ideas. He remained curious, always learning, always exploring. Fame, for him, was not an identity. It was just another chapter. And perhaps that's what made him so unique. He never clung to one version of himself. He evolved. Constantly. Fearlessly. When you step back and truly take in the full scope of his life, it doesn't feel like you're looking at just one man's journey. It feels like you're looking at multiple lifetimes compressed into a single story. And that's where the question begins to echo louder. What if we didn't limit ourselves to just one path? Carlo Pedersoli could have easily done that. He could have remained an athlete. After all, he was already making history in the pool, breaking records, representing his country, and pushing the limits of what was physically possible at the time. For most people, that alone would have been enough. More than enough. But Carlo didn't stop. He could have stayed a lawyer, building a stable and respected career. Or settled into life as a pilot, soaring through the skies, embracing the freedom of flight. Or even focused entirely on inventing, quietly shaping the future behind the scenes. Yet somehow, none of those identities alone could contain him. He refused to be defined by a single title. Instead, he became something far more rare. A man who explored his potential without hesitation. And that raises a question that's hard to ignore. How many versions of yourself have you never discovered, simply because you stopped at the first success? How often do people reach one milestone and decide, this is enough. This is who I am now. But what if that's only the beginning? Carlo's life almost feels like a challenge to that idea. A reminder that identity isn't fixed. It evolves, expands, and sometimes completely transforms. And if his story proves anything, it's this. It's never too late to become someone new. The real question is, will you dare to find out who that is? A partnership that defined generations. Then came a turning point that no one could have predicted. A moment that would change not only his life, but the lives of millions who would grow up watching him. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't engineered. It wasn't something a studio could design or replicate. It was something far more powerful. Chemistry. The kind that appears instantly and feels effortless. The kind you can't fake. When Carlo, now known to the world as Bud Spencer, teamed up with Terence Hill, something clicked in a way that defied explanation. Terence Hill was quick, agile, playful. His charm was light, almost mischievous. Bud Spencer, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. Massive, grounded, calm, and quietly intimidating. One moved like the wind. The other stood like a mountain. And together, they created magic. Their dynamic wasn't just entertaining, it was unforgettable. Their films didn't just perform well, they exploded in popularity, becoming cultural phenomena across Europe and South America. Families gathered to watch them. Children grew up imitating their scenes. Their style became instantly recognizable. And yet, there's a strange twist in this story. Despite dominating entire continents, they remained almost invisible in the United States. Why do you think that happens? How can two actors become legends for millions, and still be virtually unknown in another part of the world? Is it culture, timing, language, or something deeper about how audiences connect with storytelling? It's one of those mysteries that makes their success even more fascinating. Reinventing an entire genre. To understand their impact, you have to look at the time they rose to fame. The 1970s. Westerns were everywhere, but they all shared a similar tone. Dark, gritty, violent. The heroes were hardened. The stories were intense. The atmosphere was heavy. And then, everything changed. When They Call Me Trinity hit the screen, it didn't follow the rules. It broke them. Instead of brutality, it offered humor. Instead of bloodshed, it delivered exaggerated, almost cartoon-like fights. And at the center of it all was Bud Spencer's now iconic open palm slap. It was simple. It was ridiculous. And somehow, it was perfect. Audiences couldn't get enough of it. People laughed in ways they hadn't before in a Western film. Families, who might have avoided the genre due to its violence, suddenly found something they could enjoy together. And just like that, a new style was born. But think about this for a moment. Why do people connect more deeply with humor than with intensity? Why does laughter often leave a longer-lasting impression than fear or tension? Maybe it's because humor feels shared. It brings people together instead of pushing them apart. Or maybe it's because, in a world that can often feel overwhelming, people crave something lighter, something that reminds them not to take everything so seriously. Whatever the reason, Bud Spencer and Terence Hill tapped into something universal. And once they did, there was no going back. The man who refused to slow down. For most people, reaching that level of fame would be the finish line. A place to relax. To enjoy the rewards. To finally slow down. But Carlo Pedersoli wasn't most people. Even at the height of his film career, when he could have comfortably spent the rest of his life in the spotlight, he kept going. He became a licensed pilot. Not just casually, but seriously. He logged thousands of flight hours, mastering the skies with the same determination he once brought to swimming and acting. But even that wasn't enough. Because for Carlo, curiosity wasn't a phase, it was a way of life. So he went further. He founded his own airline. Yes, a real one. Not as a side project or a vanity idea, but as a fully functioning operation. It eventually became part of Italy's national postal system and continues to operate even today. Let that sink in for a moment. A man known worldwide for making people laugh on screen also built something that still moves mail across a nation. How many people can say that? And still, he didn't stop there. He turned his attention to invention. Over time, he secured 12 patents, exploring ideas that were ahead of their time, including early concepts related to electric vehicles, long before they became part of mainstream conversation. So now you have to ask, what drives someone like that? Is it curiosity that refuses to be satisfied? A kind of restlessness that never allows stillness? Or is it something deeper, a belief that life is meant to be explored in every possible direction? Because clearly, this wasn't about money. It wasn't about fame. It was about something else entirely. Fame, simplicity, and a gentle soul. What makes his story even more compelling is the contrast between his on-screen persona and his real-life personality. On screen, Bud Spencer was powerful, dominant, unstoppable, a force of nature. But off-screen, Carlo Pedersoli was the opposite. Gentle, humble, quietly grounded. He avoided unnecessary conflict. He valued simplicity. He stayed deeply devoted to his family for over 50 years, a rare achievement in any field, especially one as unpredictable as entertainment. And then there's one detail that almost feels unbelievable. The man famous for his perfectly timed fight scenes could barely see during filming. He was extremely nearsighted. And yet, he refused to use a stunt double. Think about that. He performed those iconic scenes, the timing, the reactions, the precision, while seeing the world in a blur. Does that change the way you see his work? Does it make those moments feel even more impressive? Because suddenly, what seemed effortless reveals a hidden layer of determination. A legacy that transcends cinema. In certain parts of the world, Bud Spencer wasn't just an actor. He was something more. In countries like Germany and Hungary, his films took on a life of their own. Through creative dubbing, the humor was amplified, the dialogue adapted, and the characters reshaped in ways that made them even more relatable to local audiences. The result? A cultural icon. Not just admired, but celebrated. Fans named buildings after him. Museums were created in his honor. Statues were built to preserve his legacy. Imagine that. A man who never chased global recognition, becoming unforgettable in places he may never have expected. It makes you wonder, is true impact something you pursue, or something that finds you? Because Carlo never seemed obsessed with being everywhere. He simply focused on living fully, on doing what interested him, on exploring whatever path felt right in the moment. And somehow, that authenticity resonated more deeply than any calculated attempt at worldwide fame ever could. The final goodbye. Every story, no matter how extraordinary, eventually reaches its final chapter. On June 27, 2016, Carlo Pedersoli passed away in Rome at the age of 86. A long life. A full life. A life that few could ever replicate. But what makes this moment even more powerful are his final words. Grazie. Thank you. Simple. Genuine. Complete. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't complicated. Just gratitude. And when Terence Hill heard the news, he found himself standing in the very place where their journey had begun so many years before. As if, somehow, life had come full circle. Isn't that something? That even after decades, success, and change, some connections remain untouched by time. The man behind the legend. So who was he, really? If you try to define him with a single label, you'll fail. Because he was never just one thing. He was a war survivor. An Olympic pioneer. A scholar. An adventurer. A creator. A risk-taker. And yes, a movie star. But maybe more than anything, he was proof that a single life doesn't have to follow a single path. And that brings us back to you. Because stories like this aren't just meant to be admired. They're meant to be questioned. They're meant to challenge something inside you. So let me ask you, which part of his life surprised you the most? Was it the Olympic achievements? The idea of founding an airline? The inventions that were ahead of their time? Or the fact that he became a film icon almost by accident? And more importantly, if you had the chance to live even one chapter of his life, which one would you choose? Would you chase excellence in one field, or explore many? Would you take the safe path, or the unpredictable one? And here's the biggest question of all. What's stopping you from becoming more than just one version of yourself? Because if Carlo Pedersoli's life teaches anything, it's this. Limits are often self-imposed. And the moment you choose to step beyond them, you might just discover a version of yourself you never knew existed.